In the waning days of Nazi Germany, as the Allied forces closed in on the heart of the Reich, Adolf Hitler made a decision that would surprise many historians. He appointed a naval officer, not a general or a party official, as his successor. This man was Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz, a figure whose life had been shaped by the seas rather than by the political intrigues of Berlin. For 20 critical days in May 1945, Dönitz, a former U-boat commander, held the highest office in a regime that was collapsing under the weight of its own failures. He faced the unimaginable task of steering a nation to surrender, while millions of civilians and soldiers fled the advancing Allied front. His tenure, brief as it was, became a remarkable study in military leadership, loyalty, and the burdens of authority in defeat. Karl Dönitz was born on September 16, 1891 in Grunau, a quiet district near Berlin. His family belonged to Germany's growing middle class, and like many young men of his generation, he was drawn to a military career. In April 1910, at the age of 18, Dönitz entered the Imperial German Navy. The Kaiser's navy was expanding its reach and influence, aiming to project power across Europe's waters. Dönitz underwent rigorous officer training, developing the discipline, technical knowledge, and strategic insight that would define his later career. His early years in the Navy instilled in him a deep understanding of naval operations, as well as an appreciation for the coordination required in large-scale maneuvers. Dönitz's first significant posting was aboard the light cruiser SMS Breslau, which operated in the Mediterranean alongside the battlecruiser Goeben. When the First World War erupted in 1914, these ships undertook a daring escape to Constantinople, eventually being transferred to the Ottoman Navy. This early exposure to high-pressure operations and the interplay of military and diplomatic strategy provided Dönitz with formative experience that would later influence his approach to submarine warfare. By 1916, Dönitz made a pivotal career choice. He transferred to Germany's growing U-boat service. Submarine warfare, still in its infancy, demanded exceptional technical skill, nerve, and decisiveness. Commanding a U-boat required both an understanding of complex machinery and the ability to make split-second decisions under life-threatening circumstances. Dönitz's first command came in January 1918 with UB-68, a coastal submarine operating in the Mediterranean. His time as commander, though brief, was intense and dangerous. On October 4, 1918, mechanical failures forced UB-68 to surface under British fire. Dönitz ordered his crew to abandon ship, demonstrating calm under pressure and adherence to the principles of leadership. He and his crew were captured, spending the remainder of the war in a British POW camp. During his captivity, Dönitz meticulously studied naval operations and began to formulate ideas about submarine tactics. These early reflections laid the groundwork for his later innovations in the Battle of the Atlantic. He observed convoy strategies, communication protocols, and the coordination of naval forces, taking careful notes that would inform his development of the Wolfpack tactics for World War II. Released in July 1919, Dönitz returned to a Germany shattered by defeat. The Treaty of Versailles had stripped the Kriegsmarine of much of its power, leaving only a fraction of its former fleet. Nevertheless, Dönitz found positions within the restricted Navy, focusing on staff roles, training assignments, and research into gunnery, signals, and naval operations. Although submarines were technically banned under the Versailles Treaty, Germany's naval leadership maintained a covert interest in them. Dönitz, along with other officers, remained connected to submarine development through secret programs and research initiatives, ensuring that the knowledge and expertise of Germany's pre-war U-boat force would not vanish entirely. By the early 1930s, Dönitz had become a respected officer within the Kriegsmarine, known for his discipline, technical acumen, and keen understanding of naval strategy. When Adolf Hitler came to power and rearmament accelerated, the Navy sought officers capable of leading a rebuilt submarine fleet. Dönitz's experience made him an obvious choice for this responsibility. When he became commander of the submarines, Dönitz inherited a fleet still in its infancy. Germany possessed only a handful of operational U-boats, a number far below what would be needed for an effective campaign. Yet Dönitz had a vision: a modern submarine arm capable of coordinated attacks, disciplined operations, and sustained pressure on enemy shipping. He believed Germany required at least 300 submarines to wage an effective campaign, a target that many political and industrial leaders considered overly ambitious. Dönitz's most influential contribution was the development of Rudel tactic, or wolfpack tactics. Rather than operate in isolation, submarines would patrol vast areas, report sightings of enemy convoys, and regroup for concentrated attacks, often at night. This approach demanded constant radio communication, centralized command, and rapid decision-making at headquarters. It also required a fleet large enough to endure attrition while maintaining relentless pressure across the Atlantic. Wolfpack tactics exploited the vulnerability of Allied convoys, particularly in the early war years when escort protections were limited. When World War II began on September 1, 1939, Germany had only 57 U-boats, with fewer than half ready for long-range operations. Despite these limitations, Dönitz's early strategies produced significant successes. U-boat crews operated from bases in Wilhelmshaven, Kiel, and Helgoland, but the fall of France in June 1940 transformed the campaign. The capture of Atlantic ports such as Lorient, Brest, La Rochelle, and Street Nazaire allowed U-boats to reach the open ocean within hours, dramatically increasing operational efficiency. These bases, protected by reinforced submarine pens, became central to the U-boat campaign, allowing Germany to challenge Allied shipping on a scale previously unimagined. Dönitz rose quickly through the ranks. He became Rear Admiral in 1939, Vice Admiral in 1940, and Admiral in 1942. In January 1943, following disagreements between Hitler and Admiral Erich Raeder, Dönitz succeeded him as Commander-in-Chief of the Kriegsmarine. This appointment reflected both Hitler's trust in Dönitz and the growing strategic importance of submarine warfare. Dönitz now had control over Germany's most effective naval weapon, tasked with influencing the course of the war across the Atlantic. The first years of the U-boat campaign were devastating for Allied shipping. In 1941 and 1942, German submarines enjoyed what crews called the happy time, a period in which convoys often lacked sufficient protection. Dönitz's tactics of speed, surprise, and concentration proved highly effective. Allied losses mounted, and for a brief period, the U-boat arm appeared unstoppable. However, the tide began to turn in 1943. Advances in radar, the breaking of German naval codes, improved air patrols, and the introduction of escort carriers inflicted severe losses on U-boat crews. In May 1943 alone, Germany lost more than 70 submarines, forcing Dönitz to withdraw many boats from the North Atlantic and re-evaluate his strategy. Despite these setbacks, Dönitz maintained a close relationship with Hitler. He regularly briefed the Führer on the progress of the naval war, providing detailed reports and strategic recommendations. His loyalty and calm communication style distinguished him from other officers caught in internal rivalries and ideological conflicts. While he later portrayed himself as a non-political naval officer, Dönitz's wartime record demonstrates clear alignment with Nazi ideology. He joined the Nazi Party in February 1944, received the Golden Party badge later that year, and made public statements echoing anti-Semitic propaganda. His speeches blamed international Jewish capital for global conflict and promoted Hitler's vision for Germany, showing that he was not merely a neutral military technocrat. By 1945, Germany's situation had deteriorated rapidly. The Allies advanced from the west, while the Soviet Union pressed in from the east. Hitler, increasingly isolated and delusional, saw the collapse of his empire but continued to cling to unrealistic visions of victory. In his final hours, Hitler appointed Dönitz as Reich president, bypassing military generals and party officials in favor of a naval commander. Dönitz, now at the helm of a defeated nation, faced the unenviable task of managing surrender, maintaining order, and preventing the complete disintegration of German society. During his brief presidency, Dönitz sought to preserve what remained of Germany's infrastructure and minimize further civilian casualties. He oversaw the surrender of German forces in both the West and the East, negotiating with Allied commanders to ensure an orderly end to hostilities. His naval background, characterized by discipline and logistical planning, proved crucial in coordinating the fragmented remnants of the German military. Dönitz's tenure, lasting only 20 days, was marked by pragmatism and a recognition of Germany's inevitable defeat. After the war, Dönitz was arrested by Allied forces and tried at Nuremberg. He faced charges of war crimes related to unrestricted submarine warfare and his role in the Nazi regime. Dönitz argued that his actions were military in nature and justified under wartime conventions, but he was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Released in 1956, Dönitz spent his remaining years reflecting on his service, maintaining that his loyalty had been to Germany rather than Hitler personally. He died on December 24, 1980, leaving a complex legacy as a naval strategist, wartime leader, and briefly the final head of a collapsing dictatorship. Karl Dönitz's life story illustrates the intersection of skill, loyalty, and moral ambiguity in times of war. From his early days as a submarine officer in World War I to his leadership of Germany's U-boat fleet and eventual role as Hitler's successor, Dönitz exemplified the qualities of a career naval officer: discipline, technical expertise, and a strategic mindset. Yet his alignment with the Nazi regime and participation in its criminal activities remain indelible marks on his record. For 20 days in May 1945, he navigated the impossible task of commanding a defeated nation, balancing the demands of surrender with the remnants of military and civil authority. In the end, Dönitz's story serves as a reminder of the complex human dimensions behind historical events, where professional skill, personal ambition, and ethical compromise often collide. By the final days of April 1945, the Third Reich was teetering on the brink of total collapse. Berlin, once the heart of Nazi power, was encircled by the Soviet Red Army, and Allied forces pressed in from the west. German command structures were breaking down, communications were fragmented, and morale had plummeted. Inside the Führer bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery, Adolf Hitler spent his last days dictating his political testament. On April 29, 1945, he formally named Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz as Reichspräsident, effectively making him head of state after Hitler's impending death. The selection of Dönitz reflected the desperate state of the regime. Senior Nazi officials, party leaders, and other military commanders were either dead, in hiding, or politically unreliable. Dönitz, by contrast, had remained loyal throughout the war, avoided entanglement in internal power struggles, and retained control over one of Germany's few functional military structures, the Kriegsmarine or Navy. Unlike other officials who had become ensnared in ideological disputes or incompetence, Dönitz had maintained discipline and operational efficiency in his branch of service. Hitler's choice, in this sense, was pragmatic. He entrusted the survival of the state's remnants to a professional soldier who had remained outside the party's internecine conflicts. On April 30, 1945, Adolf Hitler died by suicide in Berlin. News of the Führer's death reached Dönitz that evening at Plön, a coastal town on the Baltic Sea, where he had been monitoring naval operations. Initially, Dönitz's reaction was disbelief. The Führer's demise signaled not just the end of the regime he had served, but also the final unraveling of German military authority. Once the news was confirmed, he acted decisively. Understanding that Berlin was no longer tenable as a command center, he relocated his headquarters north to the Naval Academy at Merwick near Flensburg. This location, on Germany's northern coast, provided a secure operational base under the protection of the remaining naval units, allowing him to retain some semblance of authority amid the chaos. From Merwick, Dönitz established the short-lived Flensburg Government, a caretaker administration intended to oversee the final surrender of German forces and the protection of remaining civilians. He appointed Count Lutz Graf Schwerin von Krosigk, a veteran civil servant, as leading minister, effectively the government's chief administrator. Although it operated under Allied supervision and controlled almost no real territory beyond the northern German coast, the Flensburg government symbolized the last vestige of organized German governance. Dönitz faced an impossible task. Millions of German civilians were fleeing westward from the Soviet advance, often under fire and in chaotic conditions. Countless soldiers were cut off from their units or stranded behind enemy lines. Dönitz's primary objective during his 20-day tenure was to facilitate the orderly movement of refugees and troops toward areas controlled by the British and Americans, rather than allowing them to fall into Soviet hands. The underlying rationale was not only humanitarian but also strategic. He understood that surrendering to Western allies would offer the best prospects for German survival, whereas Soviet captivity often meant imprisonment, deportation, or execution. On May 4, 1945, Dönitz authorized the partial surrender of German forces in northwest Germany, Denmark, and the Netherlands. This marked the first official act under his leadership. However, it was clear that the conflict would not end until unconditional surrender was recognized by all fronts and accepted by all Allied powers. Dönitz, aware of the political and military realities, sought to coordinate the final capitulation. The formal surrender came on May 7, 1945 at Reims in France. German representatives, led by General Alfred Jodl, signed the document agreeing that all German military operations would cease by May 8, 1945. Dönitz, as head of state, authorized this action, recognizing the futility of further resistance. For the Soviet Union, a separate signing occurred in Berlin-Karlshorst on 8 to 9 May, ensuring that the surrender was valid across all occupied territories. With these signatures, the war in Europe officially ended. Despite the surrender, Dönitz attempted to maintain governmental functionality. For 2 additional weeks, the Flensburg government operated under Allied tolerance, primarily to manage administrative affairs in the northern German region. However, the Allied powers soon determined that the continuation of a German government, even a nominal one, was politically unacceptable. On May 23, 1945, British forces arrived at the Naval Academy at Merwick. Officers entered the building, informed Dönitz that his government was dissolved, and placed him and his key ministers under arrest. This moment marked the abrupt end of Dönitz's short-lived administration, closing the final chapter of Nazi governance. Following his arrest, Dönitz was transferred into Allied custody. He soon became one of the major defendants at the International Military Tribunal in Nuremberg, alongside other prominent figures of the Third Reich. The charges against him focused on 2 main areas: his responsibility for planning and waging aggressive war, and his role in conducting the U-boat campaign, which allegedly violated international maritime law. Prosecutors emphasized his loyalty to Hitler, his central position within the Kriegsmarine, and naval directives that encouraged uncompromising tactics against Allied shipping. One of the most scrutinized aspects of Dönitz's command involved orders regarding the rescue of enemy survivors. In 1942, he had instructed submarine commanders to refrain from rescue operations when conditions were dangerous, citing the risk of exposing U-boats to air attacks. Prosecutors argued that these orders contributed to unnecessary loss of life. Dönitz defended himself, asserting that the measures were standard practice and necessary to preserve his fleet, pointing to comparable restrictions in the U.S. Navy. Testimony from U.S. Admiral Chester Nimitz confirmed that similar procedures were in place for American submarines, which helped the tribunal contextualize Dönitz's decisions within wartime naval realities. While Dönitz was acquitted of the charge that he conducted unrestricted submarine warfare outside accepted norms, he was convicted on 2 counts: participation in aggressive war planning and leadership within the Nazi war effort. On October 1, 1946, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The tribunal recognized that his political influence had been more limited than other defendants, yet his involvement in executing Germany's military strategy and his close alignment with Hitler were sufficient to establish culpability. Dönitz served his sentence at Spandau Prison in Berlin, a facility jointly administered by the 4 occupying powers. His imprisonment was characterized by strict routines, limited contact with the outside world, and occasional disputes among the Allied authorities regarding prison management. Unlike other inmates, he rarely expressed overt remorse for his wartime actions. Instead, he maintained discipline, studied naval history, wrote memoirs, and engaged in limited correspondence, preserving the routines that had defined his life as a career officer. Upon his release on October 1, 1956, Dönitz settled in Aumel, a quiet town in Schleswig-Holstein. He returned to public attention in 1958 with the publication of his memoir, 10 Jaar 20 Tage, 10 Years and 20 Days. In it, he portrayed his wartime service as that of a dedicated naval officer concerned with strategy and operational efficiency rather than ideological politics. Supporters viewed the work as a testament to professional military service, emphasizing discipline, leadership, and loyalty. Critics, however, argued that Dönitz's memoir downplayed his personal loyalty to Hitler and neglected the moral consequences of serving a genocidal regime. Even after the Nuremberg trials and the full disclosure of Nazi crimes, Dönitz's statements indicated lingering ideological bias. In April 1953, he reportedly told Albert Speer that he believed his early release from prison had been delayed, if it had been the choice of the Americans and not the Jews, a comment reflecting persistent anti-Semitic sentiment. Such remarks highlighted the complexity of evaluating his legacy. Dönitz was undeniably a skilled naval strategist and administrator, yet his moral and political judgment remained deeply flawed by association with National Socialism. Karl Dönitz died on December 24, 1980, at the age of 89. His funeral was attended by several hundred former naval personnel, though no official military honors were permitted, reflecting Allied sensitivities to symbolism and the historical context of his service. His legacy remains contested. He is remembered as a master of naval strategy, particularly for his role in the Battle of the Atlantic, a devoted officer who maintained discipline amid chaos, and the final head of Nazi Germany who oversaw surrender and the transition of a nation from war to defeat. At the same time, his unwavering loyalty to Hitler and participation in the Nazi war machine ensure that his historical reputation is forever intertwined with the crimes and moral failures of the regime he served. Karl Dönitz's 20 days as head of state serve as a historical footnote of extraordinary interest. In a time when Germany was in ruins, millions of civilians and soldiers were displaced, and the nation faced absolute defeat, he held the reins of a collapsing empire. His decisions during this brief period demonstrated a combination of operational pragmatism, personal loyalty, and strategic forethought. Yet, the ethical dimensions of those choices, especially regarding refugees, military directives, and alignment with Nazi ideology, continue to provoke debate. The story of Karl Dönitz encapsulates the paradoxes of military professionalism in the service of a morally bankrupt state. Skill, order, and loyalty intertwined with complicity, ideology, and the consequences of historical catastrophe. Ultimately, the 20 days Karl Dönitz ruled Germany represent a fleeting moment when a naval officer, largely removed from the political machinations of the Reich, became the symbolic and administrative leader of a defeated state. His tenure, brief yet historically significant, illustrates the interplay of military expertise, loyalty, and survival in times of national collapse. It also offers a lens through which to examine the broader legacy of the Third Reich, how ordinary and extraordinary individuals navigated the final moments of one of history's most destructive regimes, and how their actions continue to shape our understanding of responsibility, authority, and the human dimensions of war.